Hey everybody, and welcome to Marvel Champions Experience. If you enjoy this content, please like the video. Please think about subscribing, really helps us out. And always, please comment down below. I've been having some awesome discussions with everybody in the comments. I've been doing my best to get back to everybody. I think I've done a good job. So please leave some comments and let's have some good discussions about the game. So our buddy Anthony, this is for you, man, asked for a little bit of a deck building guide. So I decided to throw one together. I've never done anything like this. I don't consider myself necessarily an expert in deck building, but I do think it's fun as hell. So I'm going to go over some suggestions for new players, and I have my little notes here that I'm going to be reading off of. So number one, please, for the love of God, don't destroy me in the comments. Everybody plays this game differently. This is meant, as some easy tips for new players. So if you think I've completely gone off the rail with something, leave some helpful feedback in the comments for the new players. This is really to help them get started, okay? We all have different play styles, and I'm going to try to highlight that. I probably play a little different than most people. Another thing I want to say is that this is... I play true solo, so a lot of this is mainly true solo deck building tips. So please know that, okay? This is to help us all get better. I've learned a lot from people on the internet. So again, if you truly disagree with something I say, that is, you're 100%, you should disagree with me, but let me know why, and let everybody who's watching know why, and then we can all get better at this game. Please add some constructive criticism. I want to get better as well. It helps us all. This is hard. This wasn't easy to do because I'm trying to cover everything that you might think about when building a deck, okay? This is definitely not for min-maxers. This is not for people who are familiar with the game. This is, if you don't know where to start, if you're like, oh my God, how the heck do I build a deck in this game? It's mainly for new players, okay? As always, whenever I make a video like this, I try to remind everybody that this is not the guide to deck building. It is a guide to deck building. I will never tell you that I am the end all be all to come watch something. I am one outlet to check out. Other people have different ideas and we go about the game in different ways. So number one tip for deck making, I suggest looking at as many videos you can find, as many personalities you can find on websites, and find what sticks with you. Okay, find what clicks with you. I'm just here to point you in a direction, and maybe my direction is the wrong direction that you don't like, and that's cool. You know what you don't like, but it'll help you find a way in the game that you enjoy playing, and there's that. So most likely, hopefully I will help you find what clicks with you in the game, okay? Another tip, join the official Discord. So I joined the official Discord over in August, the Marvel Champions Discord, and everyone there is awesome. Everyone there gives great advice. I met some awesome people that I've met in real life that we've been playing the game every Sunday, every other Sunday. So you can find a play group, you can ask questions there. So number one tip is join the official Discord, okay? And then also check out the Solo Champions League Discord. That's another really cool place on the internet that people get together and talk about the game online. Okay, all that said, let's talk about building a deck. All right, I think I have my notes laid out pretty well and the cards laid out pretty well. So when you are building a deck, right, the first thing is you have a choice, right? And here's an overview of the different aspects, right? I've got these as fillers. So you have leadership, the aspect leadership, right? The leadership aspect, and this is a broad generalization of each aspect, okay? There are little things in each aspect that fit different scenarios, but this is a broad overview. So the leadership aspect mainly focuses on allies and building up allies and working with allies. So if you want to build an ally deck, you want to look into leadership. Protection does what it says. This mainly tries to beef up your defense ability and, allow you to play the game from a defensive standpoint. Aggression, the opposite of protection. Aggression really focuses on high hitting attacks, right? Just keep going and beating the villain down until they have 0 health. Justice. Justice is the lateral, right? Not necessarily the opposite of aggression and protection, but is lateral. It meaning that this really focuses on getting the threat off of the main scheme. Okay, this is also very beneficial because you can lose by either losing your health, or the threat increasing too high. And this is going to represent our basic aspect, and you can make a deck with basic cards, but I don't think it's recommended for new players. It doesn't always work out with most heroes, and it's definitely more of an advanced thing to do. I don't really enjoy it, but it's possible. You can do it. Not many heroes can pull it off. But so the basic aspect is really going to be for filling out some holes in your deck that maybe an aspect didn't cover. All right. So these are your 4 aspects. Okay. Leadership for allies, protection for defense, aggression for attacks, for damage, justice for thwarting, and basic to fill things in. Okay. As a true solo player, I tend to lean on protection and justice. That's my preferred playstyle. So that's an overview of what the aspects look like. All right. Now let's look into, so when building a deck, right? Now that you know what each aspect does, the first thing I think this is not how I set this up. The first thing that you need to do is look into what a particular hero is good at. Okay, what is a hero good at? So I grabbed Ghost Spider, right? So notice that she has high defense, right? And her ability here says, after you resolve an interrupt or responsibility on an event, ready Ghost Spider. So you got to know what Ghost Spider is good at. She likes events, right? She likes events that have the word interrupt or response on them. So if you attack with her, right, and then play an event that has an interrupt or response, she can ready. A lot of those interrupt and responses come from protection events. So she's really good in protection. So she has a high defense already. You might want to lean into that, right? You really, really might want to lean into that. So you have when looking at your hero, you want to look at their deck first, like their 15 cards, see where they're lacking, and you might want to fill in that gap. Like she's a little weak in thwart and high in defense. So you can go either one of 2 ways. You can either beef up her thwart or lean heavy into the defense, right? I like to lean heavy into her defense. And when she defends on a villain turn, if I play a defense event, she then gets to ready, and I get to use her on the next event. So the first thing you want to do is look at the hero and see what they're good at and see where they're lacking and fill in those gaps, right? Another thing you want to do is see what their hand size is, right? Hand size 4 and hit points are 10, because you're going to want to know if you need to build a deck that has some healing built in, or 10 hit points is pretty average. She's not going to want to take a lot of damage. Okay. And another thing to look at, again, I told you the hand size, because Ironheart, right? Ironheart starts the game with a hand size of 6, but when she flips, she starts with a hand size of 4. She can increase that, but you need to remember that when you start the game with Ironheart, your hand size is going to be very small. So that's something to take into consideration. So another thing to think about is when you're in hero, so especially when you're playing true solo, right? Are you going to stay in hero form? Is your hero a hero that can just stay here and take attacks? Or are they going to need to flip? Do you need to take attacks, or are you going to flip? What does your hero do, and what do you want to do? You got to figure out what they're good at. So like Ghost Spider is very good at staying in hero form. So how are we going to do that? She's going to defend a lot, which means she's not going to take a lot of damage. Okay. So you're going to really want to beef up her defensibility. But let's pretend that she's not that good at defending and she's just like good at attacking. So what are you going to do? Are you going to stun the villain? You can also think about increasing your recovery. or raising your health. So let's take a look at that. So if you are planning on staying in hero form, the two things that I suggest building a deck around are figuring out how the villain is not going to attack you, right? If you're not defending. And one of those ways is by stunning them. So drop kick, right? Deal 4 damage. If you played only using physical resource, stun an enemy and draw a card. So you can stun an enemy with drop kick and other cards as well. I'm just using that as an example for now, right? So keep that enemy stunned so they can't attack you, so you can stay in hero form as long as possible, right? Maybe you're not focusing around stunning the enemy, so you're going to be taking damage. So if you're taking damage, what are you going to do when you flip over into hero form? You need to heal, right? Because you're going to be taking a lot of damage. So you might want to consider adding cards like Downtime, which increase your recovery, and or Endurance, which increases your health, right? So adding an Endurance to your deck will increase your health, right? Letting you stay in hero form a little longer. Adding a Downtime to that just lets you take more damage, and when you flip, you can just heal for just a big chunk of health, right? So this would help you stay in hero form a little bit longer, right? Controlling the villain with status effects like stuns, or just eating damage and choosing to heal through it at another point in time, right? So maybe another thing that you want to do is so that's by staying in hero form. If your hero is a hero that needs to flip a lot, right? So let's pretend that Ghost Spider likes to flip, right? She actually doesn't hate flipping. She flips pretty well. So Ghost Spider likes to flip, let's say, right? Now you need to worry about the threat. You got to make sure your threat is low, especially on true solo. So what are you going to do? You got a couple options here, right? You can focus on making a Justice deck, which removes threat, or focus on trying to confuse that enemy. So some basic options in Justice, right? Clear the area. Almost always auto-include in any of my Justice decks. Removes 2 threat from a scheme. If it removes the last threat, draw a card. Fantastic card, right? So you might want to remove the threat, right? I like to leave maybe 1, possibly 2. I really try to go for 1 threat on a scheme before I flip over into Alter Ego, because you know they're going to be getting a lot of threat in that scheme. So you're going to want to be looking at threat cards or thwarting cards. Another good consideration is confusing the enemy, right? Confuse an enemy. If you paid for this using a physical resource, deal 3 damage to that enemy. So if you're getting ready, if you know that you need to flip to heal, you might want to play a confuse card so that you can flip, safely heal, and that villain won't be able to scheme on that next turn, right? So if your hero likes to flip a lot, you're going to either want to consider to add cards that reduce the threat on the main scheme, or cards that will confuse the villain so that you have the ability to do that safely. Okay, let's see what else I have in my notes. All right, so as I said, you want to look into what a hero is good at and really, really lean into it. So let's look at Ant-Man and Shadowcat, okay? Ant-Man and Shadowcat. Now, these guys and girls love to flip. They love to flip, right? So Shadowcat, or sorry, not even necessarily flip, but changing their form. Changing their form is considering flipping. But these two doing it in a different way, right? So Shadowcat, so it says while you're when she's in her alter ego form, you can change your form, your solid form, to phased. And if you look at this right here, it says after you attack or defend in solid mass form, flip this card. So you can flip this card, and in turn, you change your form, right? So she likes to change her form a lot. Same thing with Ant-Man, right? You can you start with Alter Ego, and Alter Ego can either go into Tiny, and from Tiny, you could flip into Giant form, you can flip back into Alter Ego form. These two characters love to change forms. So let's take a look at a card like Ready to Rumble, right? After you change form, discard this card, Ready Your Hero. These two love Ready to Rumble. Ready to Rumble is 3 of these included in my deck every time I use a character that like this, right? Shadowcat. So let's say you are in solid form, right? Exhaust this card. You can generate a physical resource from an attack event. So you're in shadow form. You use a basic attack or a thwart. You exhaust her. Oh, sorry. Let's say you use a basic attack, right, on Shadowcat. After you attack or defend in solid mass form, flip this card, right? So I have attacked with her. I flipped. I've changed my form. I now exhaust, ready to rumble. Bam, Shadowcast ready to go again. Sick, right? Same thing with Ant-Man. Let's say I'm in tiny form. I got to remove threat. All right, I removed threat. But his ability lets me change form, right? So I'm going to change form to giant form. But I'm exhausted because I exhausted the threat. But I changed form. Exhaust, ready to rumble. Discard it. Giant form is ready to go. 3 attack. So these two love to change forms. So you're going to want to look at what your hero can do and really, really, really lean into that. Really lean into that heavy. Okay? All right. Where are we going from here? So, got it. Does your hero need specific resources? Do they need specific resources? I've grabbed all the Ironheart cards for no particular reason. I could have only really grabbed one of them. So I've played Ironheart recently, and I love her. So let's look at her ability here in her alter ego form. Spend a mental resource and place 1 progress counter on her. So we don't need to get into what the progress counters do. Just know that you need to use a mental resource on here. I have successfully made basically an all mental resource deck for her that just really leans into this use for the mental ability. And lots of heroes do that as well. So one that I don't have with me to show is Venom. I have made an all physical deck with Venom that leans into a lot of his things that allows me to play the drop kick, right? So check to see if your hero needs or really wants to lean into a specific resource, okay? Another thing just to think about is some heroes, not all, but some, especially a lot of the earlier ones, they really need specific decks for specific villains. And I grabbed Thor because he's the one that comes to my mind, right? I tried to go through all of the Mad Titan Shadow villains with Thor, and I couldn't beat Loki. I just straight up couldn't beat Loki with Thor. I couldn't figure it out. With an aggression deck, I want to say specifically. Loki just handed it to me hard. I'm sure I could do it, but that the aggression deck that I made that took me through the entire content wasn't working on Loki. So some heroes might need specific decks for specific villains. You know, Thor is extremely lacking in thwarting, even with his hero cards. So if a villain has you need to remove a lot of threat from the schemes, you gotta really make a deck tailored for that for the hero. Okay, so Thor is he even though he might make an aggression deck that works well with 90% of the villains, he for the last 10% he might need a specific deck. Okay. All right, now let's fold this up. So that's a little bit of our hero talk. Let's talk about the villain talk. I've grabbed Rhino for, just some basic reason. All right. Let's look at the villain. So, when you're deck testing and creating decks, now it's in order. Number 1's at the top. When you're creating deck tests, when you're making decks and creating decks, it's okay to play an easy villain with Bomb Scare. Bomb Scare is one of the easiest modulars in the game. It's okay to play that villain, right? This is not you have nobody to impress. You're not showing it's solo. It's a solo game, right? So try an easy villain first, then move up. It's okay to play against Rhino with Bomb Scare. I'll talk about Rhino in a second with the threat, but definitely start off with an easier villain. When you're ready to move up, that's okay. But when you're deck testing, Bomb Scare is definitely your friend. Bomb Scare is definitely your friend when you're deck testing. I highly recommend just adding this to whatever villain you want to test your deck with, okay? And then you can just increase the difficulty. So my personal favorite, let me grab it. I've just recently learned to love playing Claw with, you might not have this because I think this comes in the hood, but Ransacked Armory. Ransacked Armory adds a lot of minions. So Claw, he doesn't attack for a lot, but he does threat. You do have to deal with a lot of threat in his kit. So Claw with Ransacked Armory or even the Wrecking Crew, that adds minions to him, it kind of tests everything, right? Can I get the threat off? Can I deal with the villains with his health, with the minion health? So I've actually learned to recently love Claw with anything but Masters of Evil when I'm deck testing, because Masters of Evil is just, it's a pretty brutal minion modular. So maybe a Claw with Bomb Scare. Go for that, That's fine. That's totally cool. So when you've played your game, when you've deck tested, let's say after that, play a few games and analyze how you did, right? How did you lose the game? If you lost, let's pretend you lost the game, right? How did you lose the game? Did you lose with health, right? Did the villain just take all of your health away? Then you need to look at your deck and see where you need to make some fixes. Maybe you need to flip more to heal more, right? Maybe you need to add some more allies to chump block for you. Maybe you need to add some more protection cards for defense. If you lost see how you lost. If you lost by health, make those adjustments, right? Add some different cards. Did you lose from the main scheme, right? Maybe you need to add some more justice cards. Maybe you need to move to a justice deck. Maybe you need to add some cards that will help remove the threat on the main scheme. So analyze how you lost. Was it health or was it threat? Okay. And if you win, also look at how you won. How was the threat on the main scheme? Was it a little too high? Can you consistently win by that? Do you want to add some more justice? Do you want to add, sorry, not just necessarily justice. Do you want to add some more cards that will reduce and remove threat from the main scheme, right? What was your health? Were you low on health? Was it getting scary? These are things you need to consider. How did you win and how did you lose? Okay. Again, so aside from villains, I think I basically said this already. Some villains need specific decks, right? You want to look at the villain, like go through the villain cards and see what they have. Are there a lot of minions? Can your deck, your hero handle a lot of minions, right? Are there a lot of side schemes, or is there a lot of threat in the main scheme? It's okay to look at the villain first who you're playing and make your adjustments based on there. Okay, so that's looking a little bit at the villain. You can go over here, Gwen. Now, let's talk about, so that was some basic stuff on what the aspects are good for, how to look at your hero, how to look at the villain. Let's look at how to look at a deck overall, okay? So, number one tip when deck testing, go to Marvel CDB, right? MarvelCDB.com. That's the database that has so many different decks there, and that is my number one tip when making a deck. Go there, look at people's decks, see what you like, try something out. If you hate it, great, remove some cards, but it will help you on your road to learning how to deck test. Okay, if you don't have all the cards, that's okay. If you're looking at Marvel CDB and they have cards there that you haven't yet purchased, totally fine. See what that card does and just slot something else into it. If it's a card that removes threat and you don't have this specific card, take a look at what you got, make a substitution. If something's attacking that you don't have, make a substitution for something that you do have that attacks, okay? Let's see. All right, another good tip. I've suggested on seeing how you won and how you lost, but also take a look at the game again in your head and see what cards you didn't use. If you've played a couple games and there's some cards that you didn't use, take it out. If you only use it specifically as a payment, you don't necessarily need that card, okay? Another big thing, and I'm going to say this a lot, what is your play style? In my opinion, that's the most important thing, right? Everyone has different play styles to this game. I particularly don't like using cards that have an effect on 10% or less of cards. So let's take a look at Martial Prowess. I use this card in a specific Venom deck, but aside from that, this doesn't make it into a lot of my decks, right? Let's take a look. Exhaust Martial Prowess, generate a physical resource for an attack event. So this is only good to pay for attack event cards. If your deck doesn't have a lot of attack event cards, you want to play the numbers, right? If it's less than 10% of cards that this is used for, it's not in my deck. Not in my deck, right? I just want to play the numbers game. I love this card, but you really have to see what you have, and can this actually be beneficial? Are you only using this for like 4 cards? Because if so, that's not what you want. All right, that's not what you want. Let's see. Also, I recognize that leadership is tremendous in True Solo, but I'm not a big fan of it for the most part. I find it a little boring playing allies. That's just my personal play style, right? So you got to see how you play and what you like. I'm trying to learn how to like leadership and aggression, but I'm definitely learning to like leadership more recently. Let's see. I personally love playing events, but that's just what's fun for me, okay? Try something out. Test it out and see what you like doing. Get creative, get crazy, make mistakes, experiment. I've made some decks that I was like, this is going to be awesome. And I've got it handed to me, right? But do something crazy. I've made some aerial decks before that just like blew up the villain, but it wasn't really sustainable, but it was very fun, okay? It was very, very fun. Another thing, let's talk about card count. So you are allowed to have 40 to 50 card decks, right? But I highly, highly suggest 40 cards. 40 cards, 40 cards, right? By having 40 cards, it's going to let you get to the cards that you want more efficiently, right? It'll let you draw what you get to draw what you want much better. I learned this from playing Slay the Spire. You know, I used to make big decks in Slay the Spire, just have a lot of cards, and then I was reading a lot of tips, and people were saying you want to remove cards from your game. And then I've learned, especially in this game, the less cards you have, so playing a 40-card deck, the better odds you have of pulling a card that you actually want. So now that I've said 40 cards, you might be saying, oh, great, that's 40 cards. Well, before we even get there, out of those 40 cards, 15 of those are from your hero kit. So let's look at some basic math, right? If 15 of those are from your hero kit, that means you have 25 cards left to make a deck. That might still seem okay, but then don't forget you have to add resources. So like at minimum, you're looking at like, what did I say? 25, like 20 to 22 cards to make your deck. Now it's getting a little lighter, okay? So since you're only adding 20 to 22 new cards, you want to stick to 40 for a better chance to pull all of the good cards that you actually want, right? Here's something that it might be player specific, but I just want to throw this out there. And you really, and I go back to what I said about, you know, seeing what cards you don't use. You really want every card to count. Every single hand, every single turn. And here's why I say that. I play True Solo, and I would say a majority of the time, a vast, vast majority of the time, the game is over one way or another before I deck out, before I have to reshuffle my deck and draw new cards, right? So that being said, there's a very good chance when I particularly play that I don't get a chance to go through the deck a second time to draw a card that I want. So you want to make sure that every card is very important, okay? I don't think I've ever decked out twice in a True Solo game. Once, yes. Twice, I can't remember it again. But that's my experiences, and there's a good chance we all play differently. So, oftentimes, hero cards, like what your hero can do, is better than the aspect cards. Often, right? Not every time, but often, right? So you really want to lean into your hero cards and try to play those more when you have those in your hand. There are very few decks that can be slotted into every scenario, right? Especially with specific heroes. So if you're looking for a jack of all trades deck, you might be able to get there with some heroes, but not all. So like Venom, he's like one of my favorites, and Ghost Spider, like I have aggression and protection decks for them that really work well against all villains for the most part. But don't worry about making a deck that covers everything. It's not the easiest thing to do. Okay. Let's see. Where are we talking about next? The decks that have, in my, testing, that have the best chances of making an all-around deck are Justice and Leadership. And I know I've said that I particularly didn't like Leadership. Justice because, you want to be thinking about the threat, and your hero will more often than not have damage cards. This will help keep that threat low, let your hero focus on damaging. And Leadership, you can, use lots of allies, and they can fill in the spots of anything. They can attack, they can thwart, they can defend. So these are the two decks, Justice and Leadership, that have the best option to making a jack of all trades deck, in my opinion. Now, in the beginning of the game, I was very scared of Nick Fury, like using him, because that's a 4-cost card, right? Nick Fury is a 4-cost card, so I was very worried about basically using my whole hand to pay for it. But I've learned that his draw 3 is really important. Like, all I'm saying right here is don't be afraid of certain high cost cards depending on what they do. I've learned to love Nick Fury, and he makes it into a lot of my decks. Okay. He might be expensive, but you got to look to see what he does. And the same thing goes with Mockingbird. I used to hate Mockingbird. I used to never put her in my decks when I first started to play. But, she's a 3-cost card, very expensive, only 1 thwart, 1 attack. But, when I learned how important her stun is, right? That gives you 2 free turns. Think about this. You bring out Mockingbird, she stuns the enemy, so he's not attacking that next turn. So now you're going to the following turn, and it's the enemy's chance to attack. You then can block with Mockingbird. So this 3-cost card actually gives you 2 free turns of not taking damage. Similar with Nick Fury, because you can block with him. So don't automatically discount the high cards. See what they do. These are very, very good cards to include for if you're new to deck building. Okay. Another thing that you want to look at is these are all the power of, right? The power of leadership, protection, aggression, justice, and all of us. And these will double the resource when you're paying for a leadership card, a protection card, aggression, justice, or basic. But you're going to want to look at your deck. Do you have a lot of 2-cost cards in your deck? If you do have a lot of 2-cost cards, you're going to want to add 2 copies of power or aggression, right? Because you want a better chance of paying for those 2-cost cards. But do I have anything? But if you have a lot of 1-cost cards in your deck, or 1 or 2-cost cards, right? Actually, I should have said 3. If you have a lot of 3 or more cards, then you want power of aggression cards. But if you have a lot of 1 and 2s, you want to stick away from them. So you got to see what your deck does. If you only have a couple 3+ resource cards that cost that high, you don't need these, right? But if you have a lot of them, you're going to want to put those in your deck. Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about cheap cards and expensive cards. Is your deck too expensive? Do you have a lot of 4-cost cards? Do you have a lot of 3-cost cards? You might not be able to pay for everything, right? So take a look at what you got. Even if you have added these, there are only 2 of these per deck, and you won't be able to pay for all your cards. So you don't want to make your cards too expensive, okay? I tend to live in the on average 2-cost area, but that's just how I like to play, okay? And remember, so let's take a look at a 1-cost card. Where are you? Ready to rumble, right? Let's grab these 5 right here. So this is my hand right now. Let's say I have this hand, right? And I have a 1-cost card. I'm like, great, this only costs 1. It actually doesn't cost 1, it costs 2. It costs the 1 to pay it and this card to use it, leaving me with only 3 cards in my hand, right? So don't let the cost deceive you, as it's so cheap. It's still removing that card from your hand. And that's something that you have to think about, okay? Let's see. Where am I at now? Why did I say this? Oh, let's talk about these cards now. Avengers Mansion and Helicarrier. So these are 2 good cards, but like I said before, in true solo, I tend not to deck out, right? Meaning the game doesn't last too long. So you might want to think about either having these in your deck or not having these in your deck. Avengers Mansion costs 4. It allows you to draw a card, right? But let's think about that. So you've paid for Avengers Mansion, which costs 4. That's essentially your whole hand, right? Let's say, give me a hero. Let's say you're using Ghost Spider and you're in your hero form. She has a hand size of 5, right? So you're in your hero form, you draw a deck, you get Avengers Mansion in there. So you have a hand size of 5 and Avengers Mansion. You need to use your whole deck, your whole hand, to pay for this 1 card. Yes, on your following turns, it will let you draw a card. However, you used 4 cards to pay for it. That means you need 4 turns to break even on this because you draw 1 card. So will the game last that long, right? Will the game last? You have to include the turn that you paid it for too. So that's 5 turns, 4 to 5 turns to make this card pay for itself. Okay? Oftentimes this doesn't make it in my deck, right? Helicarrier is a little different. It's a little bit cheaper. So this has a better, for me, this has the better value. We all play differently. Don't kill me in the comments, right? But you got to think about, are you decking out? If you're decking out, sure, throw those in, right? Is it going to be a long game? Sure, throw those in. Do your games not last a long time? Throw them in, and if you don't get them on the first or second turn, resource them. Use them for payment, okay? Or not, but that's just how I play. Let's see. So you want RNG in your favor as much as possible. So that's why you want your 40 card deck. And you always have to, there are very few decks that you don't want to include your double resources. So you always want these. And one last thing to look at. Yeah, we can do this. So these max 1 per player cards, you kind of just want one of these in a, for the most part. I'm actually going to give you an example that I have three max 1 per player cards in my deck. For the most part, if a card is max 1 per player, you do only want 1, okay? Because you want RNG in your favor. You know, you want to have a lot of good cards that you can use. By putting more than 1 in your deck, you can only use it at one time. It's kind of hindering you, okay? It's kind of hindering you. So those are my basic deck testing tips. Let's take a quick look, because I'm actually about to play this game, at a deck that I've put together that I'm actually about to play for my good buddy Anthony, right? Where are you? Anthony asked to see one of my favorite decks, and I actually haven't used Spider-Ham in quite a while. So I just made this deck. And let's look at all the things that this video is going a little long, so I'll cut this short. Let's look at all the things that I talked about, right? So he's got 2 threat, 1 attack, 1 defense, so he's a little okay. But let's look at his abilities. After you make a basic recovery, place 1 tune counter on Peter Porker. Meaning, I am going to want to be flipping to recover a lot with him. Okay? What does that do? Each tune counter counts as a wild resource. Hell yeah, that's awesome, right? After Spider-Ham takes any amount of damage, place 1 tune counter on him. So when he takes damage, he gets a counter, right? When he flips, I can heal and get a counter. He wants to be flipping a bunch to take damage and to heal, okay? So I'm going to skip these cards right now because it's not what you want to see. So let's take a look at what I threw into his deck. So I've got Make the Call, but this, I don't want to talk about that. I want to look at Clarity of Purpose. Now, I literally just said, right, max 1 per character. Can I zoom in on that? Perfect. Max 1 per character. And I said you only want to keep 1 of those in your deck, and you see with these are 3. But let's look at what Clarity of Purpose does. Exhaust this card and deal 1 damage to attached character and generate a wild resource. Spider-Ham, when he takes a damage, get a wild resource. This leans right into what he is good at. He wants to take a little bit of damage, and that's essentially 2 resources I'm getting. 1 from here and 1 from the damage that it generates. And the reason why I have 3 of these in my deck is because I really want to play this card as soon as possible. I'm trying to get this card into my hand as early as possible, so I'm adding 3 to increase my odds, right? And I know I said that's not a good idea. So another thing that I thought about is let's look at team building exercise, right? Play a card from your hand. If it shares a trait with your hero, this can reduce it by 1, right? So he's a cartoon and a web warrior. Look at all of his ability cards. Cartoon, cartoon, cartoon. I can just stop. These are all cartoons, right? So team building exercise. And then he's a spider friend, right? Web warrior, web warrior, web warrior, right? So this team building exercise pays for itself right away, right? I can use all of his abilities with that. And then this is usually an auto. Let's look at, where should we go from here? Let's look at Spider-Man. Normally, this card would look like it sucks, right? Yeah, he's got some good stats there, but you must use an energy, mental, and physical resource to pay for him, right? So that's really hard to do. So what I always do, every time I use Spider-Man in a deck, I always put Across the Spider-Verse in there. Exhaust a web warrior you control, which would be Spider-Ham, right? He's a web warrior. Exhaust a web warrior you control. Search your discard pile for a web warrior ally, which is Spider-Man, and put it into play, right? So this 2-cost card allows me to pay for this 3-cost card, negating all of these, and I can pay for him. I can grab him from my discard pile. So if I grab him first, I use him as a payment. This comes up later. I draw him. All right. And let's see. Since I had Ready to Rumble before, right? Since I'm going to be flipping a lot with him to heal, I threw in Ready to Rumble. So when I flip for him, I can just get ready to go attack. And this is the bread and butter of my deck. This is what makes my deck right here. Right? Web of Life and Destiny, Warrior of the Great Web, and Spider. So let's look at Web of Life and Destiny first. Ignore this card's resource if your identity has the Web Warrior trait, which I do, so it's free. After a Web Warrior ally leaves play, choose a player, which is me, I draw a card. So every time I lose an ally, a Web Warrior ally, I draw a card. You need a Spider in your title, which I am Spider-Ham, so I can use this. All right. After a Web Warrior ally leaves play, attached character gets 1 attack until the end of that phase. So whenever I lose an ally, I draw a card, and I get +1 attack. Now, let's look at Spider. Add Spider to your hand if she was defeated by taking excess consequential damage. So, here's what I do. I play Spider. I attack with her on her first turn, right? She has 1 health. On my next turn, she readies. She thwarts for 2. She has 1 health. That's an extra consequential damage that she does, so she gets added to my hand. So she's off the board and gets added to my hand. And she still triggers +1 attack, draw a card. And she's back in my hand. Next turn, play her again. Repeat the cycle, right? I'm trying best to lean into what Spider-Ham does. And aside from the fact that he's really strong, but that is my kit for Spider-Ham. And that's just a little example of how I build decks. Again, please, 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 experienced people in the comments, don't kill me for any of the stuff that you truly hated that I said. Let's have some good discourse. Let's have some good conversation. What did I miss? Right? What do you do? Importantly, I really want to know how everyone builds decks, because I'm trying to build the best decks as possible, and so is everyone watching this video. So please leave some constructive comments. The you suck and stop playing this game. No one's ever said that, but that doesn't help anybody, right? I'm a school teacher. I'm all about constructive criticism. Tell me what I missed and what I should be thinking about and considering, and help all of the new players get into this game. And yeah, there you go, everybody. I hope you liked it. Take care.